think what you're finding higher ed doing right now is finding a way to adapt to what society is valuing at this point in time. And, sometimes that can be good or bad in the short term.
Hi, I'm Jayson Manship, host of Authentic and Agentic, presented by TechPoint. Every week on this show, we break down what's happening in AI and what it means for how we work, lead, and live. Join me for a human-focused conversation that keeps you ahead of the curve. This is the Authentic and Agentic podcast on the IBJ Media Podcast Network. Hi friends, Jayson Manship here, the host of Authentic and Agentic here on the IBJ Podcast Media Network. Today, fun stuff for you. And so I have a sit-down interview with Aman Brar. Aman is a decades-long leader here in the tech space in Indianapolis. He founded a SaaS company called Canvas, sold that. Founded a managed services company called Apparatus, sold that. Now he runs a venture capital firm called Ground Game, which is a founder-first venture capital firm. And I'll let him talk more about that later in his own introduction, but you're going to want to listen to this conversation. And here's the interesting part. It's not really about technology. It's about education. So I had a chance to interview Aman at the IBJ Power Breakfast. They do these on various topics throughout the year, and they did this one on education. Aman was one of the speakers, right? So he was one of the folks on the panel up on stage, and had a chance to pull him aside and do an interview with him before he went on stage. He has some super interesting points about where education and AI cross. I think you're really going to want to hear this conversation. So stay tuned for that. But first, on every episode, we try to do a news segment to keep you guys updated on what's going on in the news around AI. And this week I have 3 topics that I think are really kind of all over the place, but hopefully you can understand how important each of these things are. Let's just dive right in. So the first is last week, the Pope Leo, rolled out what's called an encyclical. This is like a formal letter from the Pope. It's not a tweet. It's not a press release. It's like a full-blown, it's intended to shape moral thinking for years, right, or even decades. And so he called this one Magnifica Humanica, I think is the exact terms. Magnifica Humanitas, sorry. And it was about AI specifically. So the Pope has now gone on record in written form to, again, help shape thinking on AI-related stuff. And what was interesting, I read through this, it was pretty long. I read through it all. And a lot of it aligns with what our friends at Notre Dame have been talking about, which makes sense, right? They've been advisors or partners in that conversation in Rome. And so they should have some influence or some conversation on that. But, it leads with dignity, and that's what they talk about. And so human dignity, human agency weighs in on that, talks about the risk of reducing people into just data points. You guys think about that for a second. Talked about AI replacing meaning and not just labor. So this was not about tech and labor. This was about our purpose. Why are we here? Why are we humans? Why do we exist? Right? The Pope talked about autonomous warfare and how we should guard against that and be thinking about that. And then really the importance of keeping humans morally accountable as these systems grow and grow and grow. These are hard conversations, and they're happening at the Pope's level, right? They're literally happening at every company and organization we touch, but I just want you to think about this for a second. This is not about how do we scale, how do we grow, how do we get faster, how do we build more, how do we take on the next thing. This is about how do we stay human, and how do we make sure that we're focused on the right things? To what end? What's the goal, right? And the Pope's weighing in on some of this stuff. And one note that I'll make here is that, interestingly, one of the people with him in this conversation was one of the founders of Anthropic, which is Claude, right? And so the fact that the tech leaders are engaging in these conversations around the moral side of some of this stuff is super interesting. And I've weighed on this in the past before. I don't know that I always trust all the tech leaders to be doing and saying the right things, right? Sometimes there is motivation there that's not sincere. But from everything I've read, heard, and seen from the folks at Anthropic, it seems like that's really a core tenet and principle of how they're running their company. And so just something to think about. Would love any context or feedback from you guys. If you want to shoot me an email or comment on the YouTube video or whatever, just let me know, right? I'd love to hear your perspective on where this is headed and what's happening. But I was encouraged generally that this is hitting the threshold where the Pope feels like he needs to weigh in. And it's also encouraging to see all the hard work that's happening at Notre Dame be part of that conversation, right? They're helping guide and direct some of that stuff. And so pretty awesome. Second story this week, totally different topic, full other side of the spectrum here. I read this story in The Guardian. So South Korea has launched a entertainment park that is AI. It's a fully AI-driven entertainment park. It literally sounds like science fiction, guys. This is not something that we would necessarily be ready for today, but I think they're just trying to push the envelope and seeing what's happening. So robot actors, AI-generated experiences throughout the park. They have little AI dogs that walk around you can interact with, personalized narratives. And then here's the part that was really interesting. Synthetic performers, right? Not just interacting with you like you would a Disney princess, but actually like shows you go watch. Two in particular I watch videos on, and they kind of tell a different story, but I'm going to paint this picture. So the first is K-pop, right? Obviously South Korea's music style. K-pop is the thing. And so they have full-blown stage dances and K-pop music where these robots come out with clothes on. They've put clothes on these these machines, right? And they do dances to K-pop. And what's interesting is the video I saw had 3 different dancers on stage, and their moves were perfect, right? Like coded, wired up, ready to go, and perfect. And which makes sense because they're not interacting with anything, right? They're just doing the thing they're coded to do. They're standing on a wide open stage. They're not going to bump into something. They don't have to interact with any obstacles or real-time changes. It's just go do the thing and watch it happen. And so that was cool to watch. It was neat, right? I don't know that it ever will replace humans doing it. But it was kind of neat to just see what technology is able to do. These are life-size, human-sized robots dancing to K-pop music. The second example inside of this park is boxing. They have an actual boxing ring set up with 2 robots that box each other, kind of like the old Bebop robots or whatever, where you like click the sticks on and they punched each other, rock'em sock'ems. Only these are, again, full human-sized robots with boxing gloves and helmets. I think part of that's just the show or whatever, but these things just go out there and box, and they're not remote controlled. They're not being controlled. They're fully autonomous, and they're trying to box each other. Watching this kind of tells a little bit of a different story. These things are like swinging off into the air in the opposite direction, right? They're not necessarily, a human would just knock it out right now. But I think what's interesting is that if you were watching this play out, that technology is just going to get better and better and better. These things have to adapt to real world change, like what happens if scenarios, right? They're analyzing stuff in real time and using AI to predictively do the next thing in their routines. And it's not there yet. But I think watching this sort of stuff play out in real time, 6 months from now, it's going to be tighter and tighter and tighter. And years from now, it's going to be prevalent everywhere, right? And so what I'm watching is these humanoid robots are maturing and getting better and faster. Obviously, they're not doing anything. It's the humans behind the scenes that are tweaking and changing and fixing algorithms and doing all this. But part of it is they have to touch, feel, see, and learn to know what to adapt to, right? It's kind of a fix-as-you-go model in a lot of these places. And so I thought this was a really interesting story. And the fact that a theme park has popped up that's all AI-driven, that's focused on the tech, the robotic tech behind the scenes here. And I think things are generally heading in that direction. If you think about the difference between It's a Small World at Disney versus, some of the animatronic stuff that you see now with, Burke, the Isle of Burke, or Harry Potter rides at Universal. The world's moving, right? And we're seeing us be entertained by fancier and cooler and neater animatronic type technology. So this is going to happen. The question is just to what end, right? Like, how far do we want it to happen? Do we want to go to a theme park and spend hundreds or thousands, if you take a family, to watch robots box each other and dance? I don't, right? But I don't know that sentiment may change over time. I don't know. I think it's a really interesting personal question for you to think about. Like, is that interesting to you at all? Will it be interesting to you? And here's the real question. Is it interesting to your kids? Would they find it interesting, right? Because the next generation does think differently than we do. My third story, and this is the part where I'm going to bring it all back full circle. This last weekend here in Indianapolis, the Indy 500, the greatest spectacle in racing. This is the 110th running of the Indy 500. And I just want to double click on this for a second. So, sure, AI everywhere at the 500, right? You've got AI assisted racing systems. You've got telemetry. They did a drone show at the start of the race where they flew all these drones up and they all poofed smoke in the shape and colors of the American flag on the backstretch. It was awesome to see, right? This is a massive digital production. Cameras everywhere, drones everywhere. There's certainly a ton of AI in this stuff. But to me, the magic of the Indy 500 had nothing to do with that. It's about the tradition. It's about humans coming together, 350,000 human beings in one physical location for a sporting event, right? Think about that for a second. It's tradition. It's families. It's something if you're from Indiana, it's something you kind of grew up with and know about, right? I mean, it's the grandparents bringing their kids and the next generation coming. It's the cookouts. It's the milk at the end of the race. Like, it's all memories, right? And this is the stuff that I think we have to continue to hold on to, and the stuff that we have to care about. And it was really encouraging, as someone who spends a lot of time reading, talking, and building in AI, to see humans out there not doing AI, right? Watching cars go around a track. And here's two specific, maybe 2 or 3 specific tidbits I want to talk about. One, every year, me and my buddies do a little draft of the drivers. We all put in $10 or $20, and the winner gets the pot based on who won. And every year, we've just bought the Indianapolis Star, torn it up, and thrown it in a hat. And this year, I thought about, I could in 10 minutes build a Replit app or a Claude app to do this, so we don't have to fart with clicking all this stuff, and it would just be super easy to do, and we could then just have it for every year moving forward. And I thought to myself, why would I do that? Like, part of the joy of this little exercise is to tear up the pieces of paper, right? To buy the Indianapolis Star, tear up the pieces of paper, put them in a hat, have you reach up and grab your little thing out of the hat. Like, that's the fun part. It goes away if you just like click an app and auto randomize everybody and boom, here's your drivers. Like, gross. Why would we want that? Let's stay human in this moment. I thought that was really important. The second thing I want to say is I was sitting next to this guy that we have season tickets. I go every year. Season tickets when there's only one race is kind of a funny thing, but we sit in the same seats every year, have for, 10 years. This year we had a new guy sitting next to me. I had never seen him before. And he, you could tell he was kind of like just enamored by this whole thing. He's like, what is going on? Just asked a lot of questions. Well, found out he was from Florida. This is a bucket list item to go to the Indianapolis 500. And he was here for really the pomp and circumstance of the event, more so than the race, right? He was so excited about the pre-race festivities. And I thought to myself, like, that's really also a big part of why I go. And I think a big part of why all of us go. Right, listening to Back Home Again in Indiana, seeing the Purdue Marching Band, doing the ladies and gentlemen, start your engines, doing, the parade laps with all of the various sectors and segments of the military being represented in the back of trucks. Like, such a cool human experience. The flyovers, just the patriotism. Like, it is, if you've never been to the Indy 500, you have to go once in your life. You have to put it on your bucket list, and you have to do it like this guy did. Because it is something you cannot watch on TV. It is something you cannot replicate by reading about it, right? Or watching a YouTube video. It is 100% something you have to experience in human as a human. Just the sea of people that you interact with. It's unbelievable. It's just absolutely unbelievable. But the third part about the Indy 500 I want to touch on is that when you really think about it, what's the point? Why do these cars go around a track and race each other? And to me, it's about human achievement. It's about trying to go as fast as you possibly can without risking so much that you crash and burn, right? I mean, and so it's that thin line of crazy versus reasonable where you're trying to go as fast as you can. And it's really about pushing human ingenuity. It's absolutely about trying to get us as humans to push ourselves as far as we can. And so that's cool. I mean, that's the part that I love about all this stuff. And so Indy 500, traditions, family, enjoy the time out with 350,000 of your closest friends. That's the part that I love about staying human. So the world of AI is enhancing some things around us, potentially causing a lot of problems for us in the future. But I think it's also, giving us a reason to stop and look back and say what really matters, which I think is what the Pope was talking about with his encyclical also. So I'm going to take a quick break. Thank you to our sponsors, our presenting sponsor, and iWoo as well. So TechPoint and iWoo for making the show happen. We'll run a break to them, and then we'll come back with my interview with Aman Brar. AI isn't just changing jobs, it's changing who gets hired. TechPoint's new brief, AI amplifies the need to address the experience gap, shows how AI is changing entry-level jobs, and how employers can take advantage of this moment. Download the brief and find out ways to get involved at techpoint.org/AI gap. AI is transforming every industry, and Indiana Wesleyan University is preparing professionals to lead that change. IWU offers a Master of Science in AI and Data Analytics, a graduate certificate in AI Business Innovation, and an Applied AI Analytics concentration, all designed for working adults. Flexible, online, Christ-centered, and grounded in biblical ethics. Discover how IWU can help you find the way forward. Visit indwest.edu. Aman Brar, thank you for joining us. We are at the Power Education Breakfast for the IBJ. Today you're going to talk about education and AI.
Indeed, yes.
So
be here.
You have thoughts on this topic?
Sure, yeah.
It's a big one.
It's a big one.
The world's changing around us.
Yes.
How does AI fit into all this?
Yeah, well, look, I think like any technology, humans have been really good actually at finding a way to make it fit in. Obviously, there can sometimes be challenges in the short term and disruption. But, probably ever since the fire in the wheel, we found and continue to find ways to adapt and make technology work for us. So I'm, on the optimistic end of what technologies like AI will unlock for all of us. That doesn't mean there won't be challenges in the interim as we make those transitions. Sure. But, to just frame today's conversation, I certainly think there's a lot of opportunity.
Yeah, and I mean, it's the unknown, right? We don't really know where we're headed, and so it's hard to put together a 10-year strategic plan on how education tackles this problem.
Correct.
The one thing I've seen pretty interesting in higher ed is that they're adapting faster than I've ever seen before.
Yeah.
Right? They're realizing that this has to change, and it has to change yesterday.
Yeah.
I mean, are you feeling that pressure?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's a lot of pressure in higher ed for a number of reasons, right? As I think in some ways higher ed's been pretty consistent through the course of time, but what society values continues to change and evolve, right? So I think what you're finding higher ed doing right now is finding a way to adapt to what society is valuing at this point in time, and sometimes that can be good or bad in the short term, but higher ed has to, I think, adapt to some degree nonetheless. When I think about the opportunity for AI, look, it's in some senses an industrial and technological revolution for the mind, right? And so as we went from an agricultural society to an urban society, when we were hunter-gatherers, we didn't have to work that hard to stay fit, right? And when we were working on the farm, didn't have to work that hard to stay fit. Post-industrial revolution, post-technology and robotics, you see people out jogging every morning, taking walks, trying to find ways to keep our body fit. As this same construct starts happening to our mind, I think educational institutions are going to be really important, fitness centers and gyms for the mind. So we make sure we all don't turn into mush, right? So I think it's super, super important.
What a great perspective.
Yeah.
What a great perspective, because we can outsource agency. We can let go of all this stuff and just let the robots do it for us.
Yes.
And so why? I mean, why do we keep going, right? I mean, I was talking to the folks at Notre Dame's Institute for Ethics and the Common Good, and he was, Adam Crunk, one of their philosophers there, was talking about how, now that we have GPS, he uses Waze in his car. Yeah. He doesn't remember how to get places.
Yes.
It just tells us GPS to do it. I mean, how many 10-digit phone numbers do you still have memorized?
Yeah, very, very few. It's, ironically, the ones since childhood.
Yeah.
Similar to our music taste. They don't change much either post our 20s.
That's true. So I think that's great. Like using becoming educational platforms, universities, colleges, high schools, exercising our brains, our minds.
Yes.
I mean, that's a real thing.
I think it's super, super important. We could end up in some scary places if we don't keep our minds fit.
How do we legislate that? How do we monitor that? How do we lean in on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, legislation, I will probably leave that to the experts. Sure. What I do think is there are really key conversations we should be having in society like this morning's to make sure that we're not losing the plot, right? So AI is a tool, right? We don't stress out that much about waiting and giving our kids a phone until they're in high school, okay? Yeah. We're not worried that they won't be able to figure it out, okay? Yeah. I mean, I developed an app over the weekend as a 48-year-old. I haven't touched code in a long time. I think we're going to be okay. So let's not put the tools in front of the process, if you will, and making sure that the driver's ready for the race car. I think there's a lot of work to be done.
It's interesting you say that, because in the same conversation with those folks at Notre Dame, they were interviewing leaders in Silicon Valley, the folks that were on the front lines of social media, Instagram, Facebook, all those tools back in the day, and the developers, engineers, and leaders of those platforms back when they were first coming out blocked their own children from using them.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. They knew deep down that the dopamine hits and the addiction and all of that were going to be a problem.
Yeah.
And so they literally didn't let their kids use Facebook when they were building it, right? When asking the same engineers and leaders at OpenAI and Anthropic about it, totally different answer, which I was surprised by.
Yeah.
The builders of Anthropic, the builders of OpenAI are empowering and encouraging their kids from day one to use it because they see it as a productivity enhancer.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we live in a competitive world, right?
Yeah, sure. I think both can be true, right? I think we have to find ways for our minds to be educated, for us to be able to answer, spontaneous and impromptu questions and dialogue. I also think AI is an incredible unlock for education and discovery. It's hard to think about education without the internet now.
For sure.
Right?
Yeah.
And there's no doubt that our kids learn in different ways in a post-internet world, and they'll learn in different ways in the future. So I think one of the challenges would be, like any argument, things can become very absolutist very quickly. The reality is the right answers are probably, in some thoughtful middle. And so I think we're going to find the same case here. I think, I'm a big proponent of our youth and children being exposed to these tools and leveraging these tools. Yep. So that's really not the case at all. But adjacent to that, I think they also still have to, kind of not outsource the entire mind to the machine, just like we wouldn't outsource our entire bodies to something else and turn into mush once again, right?
Yeah,
so I think both have to be true.
The challenge I have is, as an adult, I have a hard time putting down the phone.
Yeah.
Or stopping the doom scrolling or unplugging from the moment, right?
Yeah.
How did children get wired to know when it's enough? I have a 10-year-old son. If given his choice, he would play Fortnite 18 hours a day. He wouldn't sleep. He wouldn't eat. He would just play Fortnite.
Yeah, yeah.
That's a problem.
It is. Well, no doubt could be a problem. Listen, I think, it's interesting because we're in a place where there's a lot of pressure on education, on higher education. It would be hard to imagine a parentless child with an iPhone and an Xbox, right? Like, that's a pretty scary world. And DoorDash, right?
Yeah.
You put those three things together, it's a wild place. In the same way, I think we have to start appreciating the role of educators with regard to stewards of these young people's minds. And they're going to help be the stopgap to make sure that for a few hours a day, we're going to exercise the mind differently, whether that's in elementary school, middle school, high school, and in fact in college as well. That doesn't mean that those tools shouldn't be sitting side by side and working together. But I do think that this is going to be, there is some historical value of the educator to make sure that there's some guards in place with regard to how young people think about and treat their own minds and bodies.
So I was interviewing Secretary of Education, Dr. Katie Jenner, and she was talking about the changes that AI is going to bring to K-12, right? All the way through the educational workforce, but specifically in K-12. And I asked her, what does the future look like? I mean, if you were guessing, and if she's like you and I, she can't predict the future. Her perspective was there's still going to be a very heavy teacher presence in the younger ages when they're developing, where kids are learning how to do some of this stuff. But one of the things I don't think people talk enough about is the individualized learning that comes with AI, right? The fact that as you get older and you understand the systems and processes and you can kind of work through and navigate those things, like what a huge opportunity to teach, to empower a teacher, a leader, to be able to do more with less across the classroom, to be able to educate those students at the speed and type they need to be educated.
Yeah. I think technology has always been a scale factor, right? So I think if used appropriately, most people in most functions can do more with less. It's like fundamentally the definition of technology. And I think that same opportunity exists, certainly in education. I do think some things are going to be harder. Some things are going to be easier. If you think about the demands on the educator, in the old world, you could stand up, provide a lecture, answer some questions. You did some good work that day, right? In the new world where the lecture might be completely unnecessary, right? Now you've got to be on in a different way and be engaging with those minds differently and pulling out questions and driving discourse and conversation. So I'm actually not so convinced that the job gets easier. I think the job is different. It could actually be that the job's more difficult because AI has actually increased the hurdle for what great performance is, right? So I'm not, I think anybody who, kind of has really strong thoughts on the future, likely any of us, including myself, are wrong. I also don't think we should assume that education will become easier because of AI.
That's a great point.
Yeah, I think that the accountability of the educator could actually increase, and the demands on the educator could.
What would you say to the teacher, the educator that's nervous about this future? Right? Because in Indiana, we aren't you've been on the tech space, right? So you've been on the front end, but we're a slower moving state in terms of this kind of technology movement, and so change is hard.
Change is hard.
How do you get them to understand, or do they need to understand that this is? I tell folks, you either get on the train or you get hit by the train when it comes to AI. Right? Those are the options.
I think there's a lot of truth to that. I think there's a lot of truth to that with AI. Listen, I think the first thing we have to do is never mind the word teacher. Any of us in the middle of our career, we're not necessarily in the mood to be dealing with something this disruptive, right? Where I've been doing something a certain way that's been working, and all of a sudden I got to rethink how I'm doing things, right? It doesn't matter what the job is. Most people aren't excited about that when they get up in the morning. Some people are. So I think the first thing is we got to meet them where they are. We have to help with training and tools. And one of the things I think a lot about is, those of us not in education, those of us that are in the space full time, like myself, are working really hard every day to keep up. Imagine doing that while you've got to teach 20, 30, 40 young people every day. So I do think that we've got to invest in training and education and tooling for our educators. I don't think we should assume that the job gets easier. I think I can make a compelling argument that
I think that's a great argument that needs to be made, right?
That it could get more difficult. I do think more impactful and of benefit to young people. But yeah, I think there's a lot of unknowns out there, and it's an exciting time. I will say this. One thing I've encouraged folks to do is anytime you change, you use the word AI, just use the word computing. Because what we're really doing is redefining what computing is. And in the same way that it was hard. Computers showed up in the classroom. What do we do with this?
That's right.
Then all of a sudden there's iPads and Chromebooks, and now education is working side by side with computing. This is another layer, another platform of computing that I think educators and all of us in society will learn to work side by side with, and it'll be of I think important impact. But I don't think we should get the plot confused with regard to putting all the focus. It's like putting all the focus on Microsoft Office.
That's right.
Right? We got to teach Microsoft Office. It's no. We should teach, and then we will also have folks that learn how to use Microsoft Office to get their productive output done. Great. So I think that's...
well, let me ask this, though, because I was interviewing the leaders at Eli Lilly, Chief Technology Officer, Chief AI Officer. One of the struggles that companies have is that you need to learn AI. You need to engage in it. You need to do something with it on the train or hit by the train. But you don't just have every Friday free to work on it. No. You have to also keep doing your real job. Right. And so if you're an educator and you're stretched and you're already working hard, where do you find the time to do that? And should the administration level provide the resources to help empower that?
Look, I think it's probably a combination of things. My guess is that the best educators out there are finding time to, just like they might on U.S. history topics, right? So I think there's an opportunity here where there's probably accountability across the board. Hey, I owe it to myself to keep on top of tools. If the computer showed up and all of a sudden there's a word processor, yes, I would like some training. I probably ought to dabble in some word processing as well. So I think both need to be true. I do think schools need to invest in professional development. There is space for professional development. We're probably going to have to, at least investigate, topics that should be included in those professional development pathways and make sure that they're funded appropriately. I wanted to go back to one point you made about when might the teacher be needed, when they're young versus when they're older. I think what else is interesting about society is we're willing to pay a tennis coach or a soccer coach well into our mid-20s, and value coaches at the collegiate athletic level. And so I'm not convinced that we shouldn't have coaches for our mind, right? Why do I not want a coach after middle school? Right. But I do want one for football. It kind of doesn't make sense to me. And I say that as an ex football player and soccer player, but I just don't understand why we are living in a world where we think we don't need coaches for our mind, but we are cool with it, doubling down on athletics.
Substantially more important for every single one of us than our sports background. We just neglect it, or we naive. I don't know what it is, right? You just kind of assume it will be there instead of leaning into the other places.
Correct.
Everybody's talking about AI, but very few are actually executing. If your team is still experimenting with Copilot, you're already behind. Axia Technology Partners turns Microsoft AI into real business outcomes, and fast. Not prompts, not pilots. This is production-grade AI embedded into your workflows. As a Microsoft certified AI solutions provider, Axia TP delivers Microsoft E7, the full stack of security, identity, and AI, implemented, governed, and scaled. While others are testing ideas, Axia TP's clients are reducing costs, automating operations, and moving faster than their competitors. This isn't about trying AI, it's about operationalizing it, and now. If you're serious about results, not experiments, visit Axia Technology Partners and start executing. Visit www.axiatp.com. That's AXIATP.com to learn more. Well, let me pivot a little bit here. Yeah. So you are now running an organization called Ground Game, yes. Venture capital firm, investor.
Yeah.
Did a little digging on that. Cool portfolio, a lot of neat stuff. What I read was that you're leaning into SaaS stuff and AI stuff.
Yeah.
I want to unpack that because a lot of the conversations I've been having around SaaS is that AI is potentially problematic in some of these SaaS platforms where you're paying, a monthly subscription fee, and now somebody a 48-year-old can just vibe code some version of that, right?
Yeah.
So how are you thinking about that? What are you seeing in that space as it relates to SaaS and AI?
Yeah. Well, look, I think technology continues to redefine itself. I think, there were other technologies before SaaS. They were disrupted. You have new technologies post SaaS. Look, new things are going to emerge leveraging technologies. Just because we're hung up on a pricing model doesn't mean that there's not a lot of opportunity out there, right? So I do think things like the pricing models around SaaS have to evolve. They sure do. The cloud was very disruptive to mainframe technologies back in the day. So I think we'll adapt and evolve. For us and the stage that we invest, the most important thing for us is coming into contact and supporting really compelling founders, right? So we have to kind of put our egos away and say, look, we're probably not the ones that are going to figure out the future, but how do we find those that will and support them and then provide a bit of air cover and foresight given our lived experience to help these founders along. Okay. So I'm in a pretty bullish place. I do think we do need to rise up and continue to be daring in Indiana. It's an uncertain time. So I do think it's a scary time to be a founder. And in places like Indiana, it's the scariest, right? Sure. So if you're in a coastal town, coastal city, it feels a little less scary because you've got a lot of good company to your left and your right that's trying to found something. I think it's a lonelier journey here in Indiana, and we continue to need to provide support for the next generation of founders because it's really, really uncertain, but I can promise you there'll be lots of opportunity.
Yeah, it's that humble Hoosier problem, right? Like we don't want to stick our head above the berm for fear of getting seen or shot.
Right.
We just stay down and do good work and stay in the background, but that's not a founder's journey.
No, we'll shoot people. That's the problem, right? I mean, it's not irrational for the founders in Indiana to operate this way because we're not a risk-tolerant state, right? So we all hear this, right? Oh, I can't believe Johnny started that company. Did you see that massive failure that Johnny had? I mean, it's like it is a weird mindset that we have to kind of break through. So it's not so irrational for them to be afraid of their Hoosier brothers and sisters.
But the talent's here.
Yes.
Right? In 2010, I got to go out to Twilio conference.
Yep.
Got to meet an angel investor named Ron Conway and asked him a question. I said, what would you tell an aspiring entrepreneur from Indiana? Like, what's the one piece of advice you would give him? Me. And he said, move to Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
He said the entrepreneurial ecosystem here is just so different.
Yeah.
And I left there honestly kind of pissed off. Right? I was like, you guys aren't smarter than us.
Yeah.
Maybe you're a little ahead because you started faster.
Yeah.
But there is something to be said about like the building ecosystem here in Indiana, the work that you're doing, the exits that have happened here and how that turns into smart people leaning into younger people and helping founders go.
Yeah.
And that seems what you're doing at Ground Game.
Sure. Look, I think it's totally rational to get the advice and maybe even follow it that moving to the coast could be helpful to your entrepreneurial career, right? I think that is not irrational advice. I also think it's not irrational for us to have a chip on our shoulders and say, screw that. We're going to find a way to get it done here. So I think both things can be true. And ultimately, when I talk to founders, I can see it both ways. And ultimately, I can see inside of them, hey, do they really want to get out to a different place and do this thing? And look, we'll support them. Yep. But we can make, an encouraging argument as to why they should do it here. The number one thing I usually share, and it is kind of an intangible, which is, hey, cool, look, I lived in Silicon Valley. I live in Mountain View. It was great.
Sure.
I appreciated it. But you should know this right now, no one is going to care. Once you're there, nobody cares. Yeah. Okay. And here you are in a town full of care, right? And probably one or two phone calls away from a lot of folks. So as long as you go doing it, knowing that, I'm fully supportive, but just don't try to pretend that you're going to replicate the same support system that you have here. Yeah.
So they have the talent, so to speak, or maybe the ecosystem, but you have to do it, right? I mean, it's not, you don't have people coming alongside you necessarily like pushing you or helping you.
Yes,
they're there to serve you if you pay them.
Right. That's right. I mean, look, but we have our work cut out for us here.
Yeah.
I'll be frank, so I don't think we should have complete disdain for the advice that you might think
great.
about exploring a different ecosystem. I mean, even our own companies here in Indiana invest in other cities
that's right.
for talent and otherwise. So I think to pretend like we don't have opportunities in the talent landscape would also be disingenuous.
There's a lot of wisdom in that. I think we can become territorial in some places, right?
Yeah.
And there's pride. I mean, I want Hoosiers to be successful,
Absolutely.
and we all want that, right?
Absolutely. Me
But
too.
I mean, we can build something great without assuming that there's not other stuff out there.
Right. There's that comes from, when you're worried about scarcity and not enough opportunity, right? That's where those feelings come from.
Well, I find that a lot in a lot of the business folks that I talk to, and it's a scarcity mindset, not an abundance mindset.
That's exactly right. And I think if you operate an abundance mindset, you're just okay. You're like, you know what? Like Dayton's going to have some success. We're going to have some success.
Good for them.
Like we have an incredible opportunity ahead of us with AI and our core assets in the state and the life sciences and otherwise. So there's a lot of good work that we're going to go do. And it's actually wonderful that other communities get to have that opportunity as well.
So let me ask this question. In your investments, in your portfolio investments, the deals that are flowing in, that are people are pitching you, AI is the buzzword.
Yes.
You said, computing has been around forever and ever. How much of today's new startups or new investments that come to you are AI? How much of that is just like vibe coded prototypes? Like, what are you seeing right now?
Look, I think not enough of the deep problem solving, right? So I think everything's got AI in it kind of implicitly.
Sure.
The question is, did your lived experience help you discover a problem hard enough that some really difficult, complex solution can be put in place in a really simple way to go get something magical done, right? So I would say we're not seeing enough of that yet. And what we're just encouraging people to do is really think deeper about a problem, get grittier, get into the internals of a system and go solve something really hard. Because if you were able to conjure it up over a weekend, it probably means, 3 billion other people can do the same, and that therefore has some challenges.
People get lost on that a lot, right?
Yes.
They think I'm the only person with this idea.
Correct.
It's like, I mean, if I can do it, everyone else can do it too.
And it's largely an execution problem. And
it's real.
Encouraging people to be talking to early customers and really testing. We can kind of get in our own bubbles. I would say, look, you got a piece of clay, in your mind, and you could sit there all by yourself and try to mold it into Michelangelo or statue of David, if you will. Or you could get out there in the world and have a bunch of conversations that are going to help you rapidly shape that into David as fast as possible. And so I think
that's really good.
Folks are really, I think, fearful sometimes to go out there and talk. And it's my idea. The reality is our ideas, mine included, are not that unique.
Sure.
It's really an execution problem almost always. And
adoption. And I mean, let me ask this final question for you. I was thinking back to Apple's founding, Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak.
Yeah.
And I don't think Apple would exist without Steve Wozniak, right? Steve Jobs was the salesman, the pitch guy. He did all that, but Woz built it, right? In today's world, it feels like Woz is less important because AI can help you prototype and get to a version that you could take to investors or people, right? I mean, is that off the mark, that sentiment, that concept? Could a Steve Jobs exist today without Steve Wozniak?
Yeah, I don't think so. Yeah, I still think both are. I mean, particularly in the hardware space. I mean, that's
fair.
That's the first thing I point out. But even in software, listen, we're making huge strides, and I do think that the bicycle is going to keep getting, for our minds, going to keep getting faster and more powerful. But at the end of the day, the superficial stuff is very easy. The deep thought that is required to really understand how to just magically automate something in a flawless way. It takes a lot of foresight and a lot of thought and a lot of infrastructure and a lot of connectivity across apps and a lot of thinking. So I think that mindset is still required along with the commercial mindset. Now, you can do more. Some people will start companies that without a technical co-founder. That's for sure. But it's still pretty high tech at the end of the day.
Well, you're not writing the code, but you're still driving the boat, right? I mean, you have to
100%, right? There's a persona who's going to appreciate making sure that all the deep technology is working together harmoniously. There's another persona that's going to really just want to go have that next conversation today about this beautiful product that I built, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes those will be the same and sometimes they won't.
I love that. Yeah. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks.
How do people find you? What kind of deals are you looking for if you're trying to get folks to submit?
If you're a founder in Indiana or elsewhere and you've lived through a problem that you're trying to solve, we're all in to hear from you. So you can reach out to us at ground.game. You can look me up on Instagram at Aman Brar, and on LinkedIn, I'm pretty easy to find. So please stay in touch.
Aman Brar, appreciate you, friend.
Thanks.
Cheers. Thanks again to Aman Brar for sitting down with me at the IBJ Power Breakfast on education. what a cool concept, right? To be able to bring thought leaders from around the state together and have the hard conversations. I mean, if you didn't get a chance to attend this event, go watch the replay video. The publisher of the IBJ, Nate Feltman, sat down with Mitch Daniels, former Governor Mitch Daniels, former president of Purdue University, Mitch Daniels, and talked about the hard things with education, right? Like, do we need four-year colleges? How are colleges going to handle the change in the world, right? Where the expense to go to college may not justify the outcome. And I think Mitch had some crazy good perspective on that, probably better than anybody in the whole world. Like, he's literally a world-class leader on that topic. And so how neat to just be in the room and hear that conversation. And then the panelists all talked about the difficult challenges ahead, right? And how we as a society and we as leaders at every level can engage those challenges. We don't hide from them. We just lean in, right? And so what a neat thing. Really grateful to the IBJ for including me to sit out in the studio space and do a live interview with Aman prior to the show. Glad to sit and watch the event as well. If you aren't already a subscriber, please subscribe to the IBJ. It's a great publication. Literally, they do the best in all of the state in terms of covering the news. They're not paying me to say this. This is just me telling you the truth. And they put on these great events. These are the events you want to go to. These are the events that will challenge you and help you think about where the world is headed. And they do it on life sciences and technology and education. And so pick one, go do it, right? These are awesome, awesome opportunities. And I think they sell out every time too. So, find your spot, get in there and do the thing. Thank you guys for listening. Appreciate y'all. We'll see you next week.